and 780-912-910. With me in studio is Sifa Safi, regular panelist on the big sets, and the engineer Edgar Mtundisa, who is the East African Community Youth Representative for Uganda. Now, I'm very sure that, since the murder of Felix Kawesi, Hamad Chirumera, Ibrahim Abirga, Council Joan Kagezi, and a couple of prominent people that have been gunned down, Ugandans always wake up to a shock. But it wasn't any different this time. Little known Minister for State Labor, retired Colonel Charles Okello Ngola, was gunned down by Private Wilson Sabiti, who was his bodyguard. There's scanty information coming through of the definite reason as to why this gentleman was killed. But we should also know he wasn't alone. His ADC was literally also shot at, but news we are receiving from Lago Hospital is that he's recuperating and getting better. He's out of danger now. But there's been a couple of issues that have affected people in the workspace, especially boss-subordinate relationships. We know what happens every time that the interns, the doctors come out to demonstrate and protest wages and the poor working conditions. So do the teachers, and all this happens. Rarely do UPDF soldiers come out to say that the welfare is bad, but we know them, we see them, we know their barracks, where they stay, we know their living conditions, they are relatives, we know how much they struggle to keep afloat. And we are worried because these VIPs are protected by these same people. What if anything happens? Again, we don't want to see the same. Now, ours today is to interrogate. Are we kind of seated on the time bomb where there's a group of people that are very uncomfortable with how they're being treated, with the working conditions that their bosses are putting them through, and we want to understand and examine this. So let me start with Sifa Safi. First, was this shocking for you after Labor Day that the Labor Minister is put out by his own bodyguards? Is it very synonymous with the UPDF? What is the underlying factors that you think caused this?
Thank you, Banyaji, and to the listeners and viewers, good morning once again, and my colleague in the studio. It was quite surprising, but not strange. We've seen quite a number of high-profile Ugandans being gunned down, like you said. You give an example of Chirumira, you give an example of Afande Kawesi and others. But this time round, the only difference was that people are saying, why this time? But I think such cases do not have the timing, actually. There are quite a number of versions of the story that are coming out, but as usual, we should give time to the people who are investigating to come out with a real report. Whether it comes out or not, that is not my role to play, but you're waiting for it. People are trying to give justification for what happened. I don't know how and why, but every person has their own reasons. To begin with, Banyaji, I'm happy that at least no civilians were killed in this fracas, because like we said,
did it make any difference?
Yes,
because life is the same anyway.
Life is the same anyway, but Banyaji, this person, I don't know what, he was crazy or something. But many lives could have been lost.
But we are more interested in the working conditions of our personnel.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
Yes, but I wanted to give it a background. And I'm thanking God for that, because anything could have happened. You could have shot at actually even 10, 20 people, civilians, on the streets and whatever. But that didn't happen. So for me, much as people are saying that it was because of welfare and all that, I don't want to look at that. I want to look at a bigger picture, Banyaji. Because that happened, yes, and we don't even have evidence that that's the reason he gunned this gentleman down. But generally speaking, we are looking at welfare, Banyaji. Much as we are referring to that incident, but I'm not basing my discussion on that. One, we all know, like you said, we all know where these people sleep. We all know it very well, including the police officers and the military men and whatever. So something has to be done, Banyaji. But like I said at one point here, we are told that police, led by one of the gentlemen that I've forgotten, He's trying to ensure that at least accommodation is dealt with at Naguru and wherever.
Martin Okotho Chola.
Not necessarily.
Okay.
He's not the IGP. He's attached to I don't know what.
Yes.
So Banyaji, for me, yes, they're trying to do that. But what happens is, even when they put up these structures and units, it is the bigger men who, I'm using the word bigger,
The high-ranking
high-ranking officers. They're the very people who occupy those units. And according, as far as I know, those big people, the bigger ranks, the top ranks, are given allowances for accommodation. So what I'm saying, they should leave these units for the officers at lower ranks. But what they do is they get these allowances at the same time occupy those units. So such things should be looked into. Then another thing, I want to tell these top leaders in the police, in the army and whatever, that these juniors, subordinates, are human beings like them. They don't want them to fall sick, not generally speaking, but there are some OCs, for example, at particular police stations, when you talk to them one-on-one. You tell them, I'm not feeling fine, so tomorrow I'm not coming, and they hurl all sorts of insults at you. You tell them, I've lost a brother or whatever, and they'll tell you, you're not the first person to lose a brother. You go and cry until your tears dry off. So such things. These people should be treated with, with respect and dignity, because they do quite a lot of things. And like I told you, for me, that is not a job. It is just sacrifice. It's a calling. Like I saw Fande Kulaji saying that these days people recruit, join these forces, not necessarily because they want to work for the country, because they are patriotic, but because they want to get a job. Yes, that is there. That bit of it is there. But I've said this year several, and I'm not going to get out of saying the same. That training itself that these people go through, they deserve to be respected. They do quite a lot for this country. So for me, some of these bosses brag around. They look at them as their, servants and whatever, which is really quite sad. And we are lucky that these people have not turned their frustration on Ugandans. It has happened in some cases in bars. You hear someone has shot at 2 people, 3 people, but it's minimal. So for me, something has to be done. Much as they're not complaining, considering the nature of their profession, but I think they're not contented somewhere, somehow. The issue of salaries is not that much big. Yes, the increment is quite good, and we welcome it very much, and they're also happy about it. But then for me, the conditions are much better than this even increment on salaries. Because even if you make it 2 million shillings, Banyaji, and a person has to travel, I've given this example severally. We know of police officers who travel 5-6 miles to and from their work of place. So it doesn't make a lot of sense whether increase it to 3 million, but as long as they are spending on transport, accommodation, and all that, because quite a number of them are still renting out rooms somewhere for themselves. That is quite sad. Then another thing, Banyaji, I want to thank, for example, Fande General Mhozi. When you talk to these junior officers, for example, I told you that these people are not yet officers. They will tell you that for him, he wants them to look good. I've said it here before. They will tell you that he wants them to have new uniforms. But at times you look at a soldier and you ask yourself, you are paying taxes, but they cannot even dress these soldiers decently. The uniforms are torn, they have lost color and all that. So for me, they should ensure that these people, yes, the salary might not be that much enough because there is not enough money anywhere. But at least what I know, if you give these people conditions of work that are very favorable, And at one point, they talked of having this school. Their daughters and sons go to school free of charge in different schools, and they talked of constructing schools for the same. That would be much important and much better. Have them educate their children free of charge. They should have access to free health care. They should, and such things. So for me, the issue of salary
before I move to Edgar, you heard of reports of bosses, principals.
Yes.
The gentleman goes for lunch, leaves the bodyguard and the driver in the car. He goes and eats. He comes back, and he's all, how do they call it? The man is just satisfied and life is good. His handlers literally have not eaten lunch. They are tired. They're exhausted, and he can't understand.
Yes.
Some of them are just barking on their subordinates and name calling and treating them like they're invaluable. Is this some of the results of what we saw?
Yes, of course, Banyaji, we talk as civilians, but most these trained people have told us, at least have given us a clue on that, and it's obvious that you won't go with your bodyguard to a hotel and you sit and start enjoying meat and whatever. At least, but there should be a way of doing it, Banyaji. Maybe you give him 3 minutes off, and usually there are 2 or more, there are more than 1 bodyguards, or at least. So, but the issue is, the important thing is, these people should also feel like you're doing. They should also eat something. They should also drink something. It doesn't matter whether you go at the same time or not, but they should eat. And actually, we were saying that you might not sit with him in a hotel and eat, but when you give him 20K, He knows how to cater for
But
that.
the
Maybe you buy
UPDF
something.
the UPDF came out and said they are not obliged. The principals are not obliged to meet any of that. It's just on humanitarian grounds that
Exactly.
I
And
can
that's
pick
what
out
we are
of
saying,
my
Banyaji.
pocket.
It's even
and-
like when you're grazing cows, someone is grazing, yes, there is this monthly salary. But you can, one moment you come on a very happy day and you say you get this pair of trousers to that person, the herdsman. It's not part of the salary, but we all do that. And actually, let's not focus on security operatives only. Even ordinary jobs for civilians, radios, companies, and whatever. People are treating people like trash. You know, someone comes late for just 2 minutes and you're just barking at them literally as if it's a small child like this, as if it's a dog. You know, someone is sick and they tell you, I'm not going to make it tomorrow, and you're like, that is your money deducted. Why? It is not out of the. So for me, Banyaji, generally speaking, the way we are treating our workers in this country, our employees, is quite sad and alarming.
Okay.
Something has to be done.
All right.
Look at, I'm told there are households where someone cooks, you know, a maid cooks, you know, rice, meat, and whatever, talk of beans and whatever, then you put that food on the table, you go back to cater for your own. They give you, water matoka otekemo munyu nakatungulu byogendo kulya. You're just being stupid. Omuntu okutechera ebyokulya, you have to respect them. And someone visited us at one point. I was quite young. I was in secondary school, I think, around senior 4, around about there. So we cooked and sat, and when time for eating came, we were all seated on the same table, and this person was like, nena mwe muliyimba. Why? This is a human being, just like you.
Okay.
Try to help them here and there, and I don't know why you should cook food. And I mean, someone cooks for you and you don't want this person to eat with you.
All right.
Anything can happen.
Thank you,
So
Sifo.
let's treat them with dignity.
Let
They
me
are human
bring in
beings like
engineer
us.
Edgar here. The position I want us to talk about is, first, we know for sure that this gentleman had served in Somalia. We know what is happening. It's a battlefield, and this gentleman comes, you know, is now deployed to protect a state minister for labor without any post-trauma rehabilitation of sorts. Do you think the cases that we hear from, especially the security personnel in bars that go and kill on rampage, you know, over crimes of passion and all these elements, it's because they don't get the rehabilitation to kind of transform them from the setting of the battlefield and combat operations to normal lives where they will have to take on command, you know, act with civility and respect the law?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Banaji. I think that could hold in some instances that someone is not mentally prepared, they're somehow psychologically maybe disturbed because of the different atrocities they have had to evidence when they're in war, when they're in combat. However, I do think there is a reason as to why they would choose such a gentleman to guard a minister and not any other normal private in the army who hasn't gone to Somalia. The assumption here is that that gentleman had some level of proven, conscious to manage the situation or be able to assimilate, because you also know officers who have gone to Somalia and they are very good, decent officers who have even higher ranking and very many things. They're really stable in mind and everything. So they understand what it's supposed to do. So my assumption is that before you deploy such a person to be a bodyguard in a civilian environment, your background check or you've done some study and you know he's fit. Because you also had private guards who are not in Somalia that you could have chosen to guard a minister.
True.
So now, that's where I would now say, let me just pass that and say he was stable. But also, we need to understand that even if the situations of say, an employment, maybe his salary was not paid in time and all that, this is someone who at best was a UPDF person, and that means in most cases, these are people who best do have some strong, level of discipline, that they're able to sustain very many things, and somehow, as compared to a civilian who would easily, cry out and say myself and etc. So that shows to you on how dire the state must have been, that such a person, a soldier, that extent, could get off the window. But also, I think the possibility I'm trying to analyze here, or I'm trying to imagine, is that you can imagine this just happens after the Labor Day, right? And this is the minister, perhaps, and these bodyguards always somehow tap all the conversations. Sometimes the minister is meeting this person, you're making some pledges, they're there listening. So maybe I do assume also it must have been a scenario where you're a labor and you're making some nice empty statements as a minister on our workers are doing well and etc. We are doing good policies in terms of employment, and the person standing next to you guarding you knows has not had any into the truth in that, and perhaps they feel they're insulted as persons and all that. So I think that could also have been an element. But now, when we look at the point of whether now what should be a solution, do you give such bodyguards? Do we think it's a time bobbing bond? Should we think add more money? I think that will not be fair, because I think soldiers and the army in general should be a reflection of the people. The reason as to why, if you are tired with the government, it's very easy for you to go on the streets. It should be at least, okay, in principle, that if you go to the streets and you riot and you say these riots, these people should protect you. The idea that is not said, really, the unsaid idea there is that the principle is that the soldiers should be able to relate with the population. So at a point where you have soldiers, build some sort of world, some castle for them, where they have all the money, they have all the salary, they don't understand the problems of the wananchi. Then they will never respect the wananchi. If you wake up, manager, and go on the streets to strike because of rising fuel prices, they will instead come and tear gas and shoot you because they can't relate with you. So there should be some level where these people relate with the population. So the soldier's salary should only increase if the normal salary of everyone else is increasing, for instance. But also, does the increment in salary really answer that question? I don't think it does. I think what really answers the question, the real long-term solution to this, will be a concept of labor democratization. And that's the hard topic we need to discuss. And not almost everyone, starting in economic schools, they never discuss it. The idea that, democracy generally in principle is that, you all have a say on how you run and society. The idea that power belongs to the people, that all of you should collectively contribute to something. But then there's one thing that bothers me is that, why is that concept not discussed in the work environment? There's an idea, an unsaid rule, that you can discuss democracy outside the work environment. In politics, in leadership, you can shout everywhere, but if you are within work environment, democracy should not hold. And why is that?
Because I think it would be against the true principles of capitalism, which is about exploitation. Basically, you're hired and given a moment to simply get 100% out of you. So if at all you deploy the same principles, it would literally mean that if it's democracy, I can choose when to work and when not to. And capitalism will not allow that to prevail. Otherwise, it will be off. It cannot have a balance.
No, but now you see capitalism in principle actually promises. The behind principle of capitalism was that, when you look at the Adam Smith and what was the Karl Marx, Adam Smith was actually promising, showing you that capitalism would give that sort of equality, that everyone is going to be okay. Because the problem then was that there was an element of these bourgeoisies so much against proletariats. There were very few controlling everything, enslaving everyone. The solution was there. But now if you analyze the capitalism which exists currently, it's the same thing that is happening. That you still have few people, few bosses who are the bourgeoisies, and very many proletariats suffering and etc. Only earning money that can afford them transport on a border to go and work and be slaves forever. So now that means that capitalism itself, in a principle which it promised, cannot hold. And there can be a balance. Because, for instance, it's not that if you allow people to democratize in workspaces, then they're going to decide perhaps choose not to work, etc. They may, but at least there would be reasons. You all agree. That's like how you have that, we all are going to be working from Monday to Friday because we justified why that is it. But also the most important element there is that as companies grow, because you need to understand that labor in principle serves two things. One, it serves an increase in production. It should serve that. It's a services and etc. and the quality of it. But number two, it also has to serve the dignity of the workforce. Now, the question is, who best determines the dignity of the workforce? For production, we leave it to the bosses and everyone else. Can they determine? The market can determine. But the dignity, no one cares. If you get your yogurt here, you don't care whether the person who made that yogurt at that point, whether it was paid or not, for you, are happy.
Absolutely.
Yes, and you would demand that I need more yogurt, it is because you need it. So that second element of dignity is left because no one cares about it. Even the boss who is paying this person doesn't necessarily care. So I think the only best way to do that is when you have these people have a say. For instance, they must be able to understand that if our workforce has led this company to have a rise of 1 billion in profits, then my salary shouldn't remain 300,000. My salary should as well move to 500,000. See? So it's not like maybe they have said now I should earn more than the boss. That may be ideal, but at least there's some level of improvement and everyone feels happy. Now, to contextualize that in terms of the bodyguard issue, imagine where the bodyguard knows, they think and they know you're going for a mission in Karamoja, we shall be there for 7 days, and the bodyguard has a say to say, yes, sir, that would be good. But the problem, I don't understand where I'll be sleeping. I'm in Karamoja. and the person can say, now I think on that one, you know.
But you see, the training of a UPDF personnel is to help them build the capacity to endure conditions and situations that ordinarily would be very difficult to deal with. So we would think that they are built, reinforced to deal with such circumstances as they may be faced, don't you think?
Yes, and I think that should happen, as you said, where it's not possible, where it's not easy. For instance, that they're prepared that even if you agree that you are going here and you have a hotel room, but then you reach and that hotel room perhaps anything happens, or there is need that you may not necessarily have to sleep, then they can't do that. But at least they should have mentally, they're prepared to understand that they're respected. That's number one, they're dignified, number two, but also that it's not an everyday thing. Otherwise, why do we pay them? Why don't we say that as a soldier, you sacrifice, that's what you're trained for, and there will never be a salary for you, unless when we decide to give it to you or not.
All right, let me get back to Sifa. Sifa, I think discussing the general principle of how labor is exhausted or attain productivity, and generally about relations and how people are able to benefit of what their sweat is about. We see not only the UPDF soldiers, but the doctors. There's been an exhibition of the conditions under which our doctors are working online, and it's literally, in fact, all over. It literally clogged the internet. We cannot be discussing that incident as an isolated case. When you hear on one side ministers and members of parliament stealing public funds and using them for personal goods, vis-a-vis the people that are on the front line give up everything that they are to just make sure that Ugandans are able to consume public goods. Is this the contestation that has created this kind of agitation eventually, where people think there is one class of people that is just having a good life, and there is us who are like slaves in our own country? How do we have that addressed?
Thank you so much. We cannot really put that out of the equation. People are really talking of inequality, and we all agree it's there. The recent scandal talked of iron sheets, for example, has made people speak their mind, and I like that. Because when you talk of about 5 or 10 people, so even if there are 20 people in this country, and they're using money meant for almost half of this population of the whole country, what do you expect of people to do? We are talking about someone earning 500K, for example, police officer or whatever. I'm just giving an assumption. It's not an exact figure. And then you are looking at an MP who is earning that much money with all those allowances. What do you expect? And we have severally seen these MPs being the ones mocking these officers. For example, on the road, driving, someone asks you to, for example, a traffic officer asks you to, show your permit, and all you can tell them is, after all, how much do you earn? You're just eating dust here. Your salary is my dog's, can buy food for my dog for a day or for whatever, all those things. So you don't expect that even when someone is keeping quiet, something like that, they are keeping quiet, but there's a lot in their heads. And one of these things that is actually making this worse is what you talked about, inequality, that gap. Why should someone earn 500 million, rather 50 million a month when some other person is earning, and yet actually they have the same qualifications? For example, you talked of doctors. We know what they do. They also they sacrifice, just like I talked of soldiers and whatever, but they get little. Yes, we might not satisfy them, but I said let these conditions be, for example, conducive. Even Article 40 of the Constitution of Uganda,
isn't that confusing when you hear the president saying we are going to prioritize science and our doctors are a priority? Because you cannot talk about science without looking at the gist of what science is about, the people, the people that are able to render the service. How can you preach science, but at the end of the day, you have a group of people that are not deployed for their internship, and we know they literally do 90% of the load in our hospitals? How can we have equipment? You invest in an equipment about 5 billion shillings and you cannot maintain this equipment, and people are losing because they just can't have a service of this equipment. Is President Museveni preaching one thing to mean the other?
Well, I don't know. Maybe it is the issue of budget constraints. I don't know if it's because of allocations of funds to different sectors of this country. I don't know whether I should blame the president or the MPs or whatever, but I think each of them carries a portion of their blame. For example, you talk of sciences, that's true. But every day we see doctors striking. And the reason they are striking is because they're saying maybe their salaries have delayed. Such a thing is, for me, I don't know. It's ironic, for example. How do you tell us that you've delayed salaries of doctors when you know that actually within those few days of striking, we can lose lives just like that? Out of carelessness. We have a lot of money in this country, like I said, but how we put it to use is what matters. They are putting taxes, whatever, and I saw someone saying that you are collecting taxes, for example, on mineral water because we want to reach all people in Uganda to get safe water. That is quite sad. There are other avenues, other ways, other platforms, other sources of money. We can get money to get clean water in this country rather than, taxing people. Someone said that even when you go to functions, people don't take water. They take. That is, I don't know where these people carry their research from. I don't know why these people went to school. I don't know what they do. I don't know what courses they did. But like I've always said, they're not pro people, and we are lacking people who really can talk. That is why I've told you that for me, it's not about who comes from where, what color you're putting on. If someone like Semuju stands up, we gave an example of Semuju last Saturday, you can feel they have a country at heart, even if they're opposition. But someone gives excuses and justification for the taxation, and they don't add up. So you talked about capitalism somewhere, somehow. That is true. You want the maximum profit out of someone, of your worker. But there should be conditions. Even Article 40, I was giving an example, the Constitution talks about it. Someone should work under satisfactory conditions. Safe, for example, doctors. Safe and clean environment for them to work. So for me, this issue of salary review, we talked about it, is an important thing. People just do not give it a lot of attention, but it is important. Why should we be having someone getting getting money that can be a salary for 10 teachers per month, or even for 5 doctors? We are going to see a lot of this happen. If teachers are striking, doctors are striking, you are going to see more of this, which is going to be sad.
But are you cognizant of the fact that His Excellency, the President's State House, takes a huge chunk of that budget and goes ahead to acquire supplementary allocations to the service of one individual called General Yoweri Museveni?
Yes, Banyaji.
Aren't you able to also compare notes and say, wait a minute, Mr. President, how much are we able to allocate to your office vis-a-vis what we get out of it, compared to other sectors of the economy, that perhaps we need an elevation here?
Yes, people talk of the office of the president, being allocated a lot of money. But for me, when you look at it, it's quite a bigger thing. I don't know if people think maybe this money is for him to buy suits, to buy whatever. No. There's a lot of things that are being done under that fund that is given to the president. And even the office of the president itself is a very big thing. There are so many other departments in that office. So I wouldn't give much focus and attention to that money. Because if this money was... The problem is, Banyaji, corruption and stealing by these people we should trust with our money. Otherwise, if they are not stealing, this money would be used, for quite a number of other services. What I'm saying here is we are talking about doctors striking, and they are being intimidated here and there. That's true. By the time you signed that agreement, you knew how much you're going to get. But as things change, because the world is not static.
But that's a slap in the face of a medical practitioner who just wakes up to save life.
I'm not talking about
you're telling them that you know the salary that you are signing for.
Excuse me.
So why...
Do not narrow it down to doctors. Civil servants generally. By the time you sign a contract or whatever, you know what you're going to get. But what I'm saying, the world is not static.
So does that disentitle them of bargain?
But I think
for
I gave
better?
You the background that they should be able to understand.
But at least we put that statement in context.
Yes, what I'm saying, that is one of the excuses and the reasons these people are giving. But things are changing. Economic times are changing. Everything is changing. So we should be able to enhance salaries across the board. My only problem is, why should we focus on a particular sector, health or whatever? It should be general, like I said. Teachers, soldiers, doctors, name it. Because like I said, we are seeing just a few people earning and being happy with their salaries, why other people are lamenting, and that is true. So if we talk about enhancing salaries, it should be general. It should cut across the board.
Okay.
And that is why we're going to see service delivery for Ugandans. That is why it's going to be effective.
The leader economics that he studied requires that for public policy, if at all you want to eradicate poverty and get a good section of people in at least the middle class, you look at how much on what they spend on. They're spending on health, education, sanitation, and basic things that if government invests heavily, qualitatively, and they don't have to spend on those particular elements, they will have a lot of money retained as disposable income that they can be able to, live their lives and their households, and everyone around them is happy.
Yeah, maybe let me conclude on that, Banyaji, before
Yes.
I give my friend an opportunity. That is very true, and we cannot even debate about that. Like I said, even if you give these soldiers 2 million shillings, for example, per month, but if they are still spending on transport, if they are still spending on school fees for their children, so bring it down to the ordinary Ugandans, the civilians. Even if you give a commissioner somewhere, in some office, 5 million shillings. But anyway, let's not even talk about commissioners. Let's talk about ordinary Ugandans. If someone is earning, for example, 200k per month, but they have to pay fees, the health whatever service bills are very big, they spend a lot on school fees. It doesn't make sense. But they just work on these things, these sectors, health, education, and name it. I gave an example even of housing. Then things will be automatic. That someone who is spending on a hospital bill, I mean, for example, a child is sick, malaria, and you have to spend per week, for example, if your child is admitted somewhere, even if it is a government hospital, by the way, you spend a lot. But if that is catered for, that means you can save that money for other things, That means automatically household incomes will increase, even if you don't come to talk about the parish model, whatever. So I don't know who advises the president. I don't know what these technical people do. But the thing is, what ambromnya Uganda school fees, okamuya esente zokushashura oburwire n'ebindi nkebyo naija kusavinga gire nakiyakora. Some people want to start up small businesses, Banyaji, for just little money, but they don't have that money because they are spending on quite a lot of things.
Thank you, Sifa. When we come back into our second hour, we shall be looking at social support. We have religious institutions, we have all these other elders in our communities. They must be able to predict a situation and kind of guide on how to navigate it. After that short, very commercial break, when we come back, I'll be able to open up the line so that you can join the conversation on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The Big City is on. My name is Wes Sigebanyaji. Keep it locked. The Big City is coming back after the break.
It's tough, it's bold, it's real politics. The Big Seat.
back. It's 2 minutes past 10 o'clock on Western Uganda's biggest radio station, 91.2 Crooze FM. Great music, great friends. My name is Wesi Gebanyaji, and I'm saying good morning to you that are listening in and are watching on Crooze TV. Thank you so much for doing just that. Let's get your feedback on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. And on our social media platforms, support the question on what you think about, how these subordinates and workers are treated as we commemorate the International Labour Day. With me in studio is Sifa Safi and Edgar Mtundisa. We're discussing the state of affairs in the labor world. Edgar, before we pick the feedback, we know that Entebbe International Airport gets jammed with young people trying to dare their way to the Emirates, to all those other Arab countries to find something to do and work. The reports out there are not any different. Some of them come back in the cargo planes because they've been beaten to death, they've been stabbed, they've been tortured, name it. Is it generally that human beings just don't care about anyone that is less than them? It doesn't matter. For as long as I'm fine, whoever is below me is none of my business. And even when they feel they are not treated right, they literally have no option but to just get on board a plane and go to Qatar, whatever this country is, and just try to work for their families. It never ends well sometimes. Yes. And we forget that element too, that even when people that are in a bigger economy, that are more exposed, it's even in the US or London or in the UK or in Europe, you still find, as that follow soccer, you find that black players, maybe African players, are not treated better than the English players or the white people. It's not a very isolated case for us, where you see a person, mistreated by a supervisor or a boss. It literally the same. Is this how human beings treat each other, you think?
Yes, I think so much, Mr. Wanaji. I think principally that may be right, because somehow that, of course, the lesser people, they are lesser people. People think they're lesser people. There are also people who are, a little higher. It explains why an MP comes here and everyone wants to come, and then someone else comes and then no one wants to go there. But I think if you compare, now you see for the US, etc., it couldn't be racism and etc. That's a whole different scenario. But also, of course, the element of a boss being treated better than a normal person, that is also normal. But the rate at which that happens varies. For instance, I'll give an example. Last time when we had a shooting here, Bobby Wine, or I think it was Bobi Wine's driver. Remember that incident?
Yeah,
and
sure.
In the news, everyone was talking instead about Bobby Wine. I can bet if you ask many people who even remembers the name of the driver.
Yasin Kauma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Who actually died. Very few people would actually know that, because almost even no one cares. Even the media itself, the reporting that the headlines that they will make so much, they won't care so much to make mention of such a person. They politicize everything and let everything go back to the main guy. And I think the reason is, not that much inherent, but like I said, it's because these people perhaps don't matter. Now the question is, what makes these people don't matter? It's because they don't have the voting rights. That's why I think, honestly speaking, that problem of people not caring about the lower dogs can only be made possible, or can only be rectified, if there is some level of work democracy. When you know that regardless of if you're a boss or not, that your salary will only rise from 10 million to 12 million if the lowest guy, the cleaner, also agrees that it should rise there. But for as long as the cleaner has no say to the rise of your salary or anything, or how your profits will be spent, you will never find the incentive to in any way value them. You can fire them, and from 300 even get someone who is willing to work for 50,000. So there's nothing that they find as sort of an incentive. That's why the whole system has to be outdone and create some incentive. There should be an incentive as why this lower person also has a say and matters. That's when then the respect almost comes true off. But the other question is, I think as you guys were discussing on salary and whether we should cut salary, that it's unfair for some people to earn more and others earning so less. Some wouldn't have a problem with that in some context. But now those in some context, you wonder, you get to see like our parliament and the MPs that we do have. Of course, yesterday, congratulations, I think I saw some lawyer, is it Isaac?
Semakade.
Yeah. On that narcotic.
Yes, narcotic, where the Constitutional Court made a ruling on the narcotic, act.
And I think it was nullified.
Yes.
Yeah, I think people were happy, and this is, I think that's okay. That's amazing.
Because it kind of now legalizes medicinal marijuana. It does not necessarily allow people to just passively smoke marijuana, but to use it perhaps for medicinal purposes.
Does it in a way incentivize us to grow it?
It now does.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think of course that will be good because so many people were of course happy about it. Now, I was looking at, for instance, MPs. You get to look at our parliament and our house and the certain people want this and you wonder for what? We have MPs, honestly speaking, I can say maybe over 80%. They don't even, like, if you've had a conversation with them, you get worried.
They're clueless.
Yes, they're clueless. They don't know anything, don't understand. They just, I don't even know how they get that house, right? But then they get so much money.
But they're a representation of who we are as a people.
But then I think if that is it, then I think they deserve less. That's like the people that they're representing actually earning less. This MP sure the representation, we are earning 300,000, 500,000. They should equally just earn 1 million because they're not in any way any different.
But the whole baggage that you have to put on their shoulders of paying school fees for your in-laws and your relatives, they have to meet your burial expenses, they are paying your school fees, they're doing all this kind of work in their constituency. What do you expect? Literally all of them, in fact, research has shown that when a person enters parliament, they're evicted or they lose an election, they slide back to where they were. You know, if someone was wealthier, perhaps to 500 million shillings, and what that was their asset value, they would slip to over 100 million. So literally, it doesn't serve them in good, rather than lose what they should have had.
Now, any sensible person that would assume that would have been the incentive to push them to have the healthcare we're talking about. That is almost free, to have the almost free education, so that no one has to call them to take their child to school. But then they're still there. You never get any reform. Like, honestly, one would argue that the parliament has been liability, largely. Because there's no any bill that passes or somehow.
They just passed the anti-homosexuality bill. They passed the computer misuse bill. And a couple of other bills. Ugandans should be educated to know that all new taxes come as bills and acts of parliament.
Yes, but now, let's analyze my idea. If you look at all the bills you're talking about, even the computer misuse, you saw there was this debate. I think with also again the same lawyer, Isaac Samakande and the other MP of the city of Kawempe, on that wall, on how it was unnecessary and everything, but also enforcement is very laughable. So like there's just everything. You saw the anti-homosexuality bill, that even people who are against the homosexuals, if you look at the draft, the text of that bill, it's laughable. It's like it was drafted by a P2.
Let me add on something, maybe.
Yes.
All
right.
But it's not about passing bills in parliament. Even if you pass 100 and whatever, by the end of the day, we want to see how these bills you pass impact positively on Ugandans. Because some of these bills actually benefit the MPs themselves.
But
Someone
we
has
have a labor law in this country that is a framework upon which Ugandans are able to to deploy their skill sets. So it is not that Parliament has been complacent, that they don't really care about the conditions of our people.
I was talking about,
there are different legal provisions that protect the conditions upon which Ugandans are able to work.
No, Mr. Alaji, no. Let's face it. One, I'll show you the Computer Misuse Act. You could debate it on another day, and we'll have a full day debate, but it's a whole other wastage of time. The anti-homosexuality one.
But you see, Parliament passes over 100 bills, and you're going to mention about 4 or 5. There are other bills that are very paramount and important.
Let's go to another one. Another one, which is very so common. The one of, I think, the one which was which replaced, which meant I think which was supposed to replace this one on liquor. The one
the Angoli Act
and all that. Again, another useless thing. If you read an ETC. Like, I think if we had time to debate these bills, but also that shouldn't be an excuse that they passed very many bills and they're choosing a few. Also, I think if the bills were that much sensible, they should be attracting attention and everyone on the media.
But now the ball comes back to you Ugandans who are able to elect them to parliament. Yes, Sifa.
The landlord-tenant bill, something like that. How many Ugandans benefited from it?
The landlord-tenant bill, it is saying that
how many landlords do we have?
They must remit money to the Uganda Revenue Authority on their incomes of rent.
The landlords?
Yes.
Okay, then how do we benefit?
How does the tenant?
Service provision.
The tenants.
The tenants.
Yes.
Well, service provision, if at all your access road is made by the municipal council, then how do you want to benefit better?
No, what
If
you
you're
are
living
saying-
in a secure
what I was
environment.
saying, at the end of the day, some of these bills are just for a particular group of Ugandans.
Yes, because
Right.
you see,
But I don't want us to sit here and castigate Parliament and think it is very useless.
No,
in
we-
terms,
nobody said that at least.
yes, absolutely. In terms of representation, oversight, there is a lot more money should have gone to West if at all Parliament and standing committees and sectoral committees were not doing their job.
Mr.
Like
Raji,
Park and
Mr. Raji, I want us to analyze really if there's any report ever that if there was money meant to do harm, but because of Parliament's intervention, that harm didn't. What this Parliament does is that the harm happens and some of them make notes about it, but it continues. We had recently on social media, and I think social media activism perhaps would do us good. You saw recently exhibitions of bottles, then health exhibitions, and I saw Diana. I saw the permanent secretary Diana.
Their twin.
Yeah, when blocked. The other
Spire, Dr. Spire.
Dr. Spire, but also let alone was pressured and blocked,
Yeah.
and actually came and appeared on a Twitter space.
Yes.
There's that much pressure. I think it was really amazing. But you get to recognize that in all those effects and stuff that happens, that the Parliament does nothing. But also the people, we're actually also questioning. You saw that this hospital which were trying to, after getting a loan of, I don't know how many, was it about
The
$300
Luboa, yes.
million, and nothing has happened. We just still at the foundation, comparing it to an already made hospital in Tanzania, which was built on only $60 million, right? But then we saw all of this. I think that there's so much that happens and the Parliament never intervenes.
Aye.
But also, if Parliament is really important, we can look at the Communist Party in China. How literally the Parliament almost sits only twice. And they only sit to discuss the urgent matter. They discuss and they say we shall only sit for this period, whether a month. They discuss long term, they discuss all those things, and then they go back.
All right. Let me engage Sifa on the matter of the private sector. So many times we, throw stones at government because it's the biggest employer, because of our small economy. But there is a private sector. President Museveni's message is, let's ease doing business in Uganda. Let's allow investors come here. We have departments, authorities that are meant to entice and attract investors to come and invest in this economy. A Chinese comes, a Palestinian comes, and a person from whatever country comes with their $10,000, $100,000, whatever, to invest in this economy here. And we say the argument is they are going to create jobs. But the quality of jobs that these investors are creating and the conditions upon which they're employing our Ugandans, isn't it something that government should also be looking out for? Because I'm very sure the industrial court, especially to do with labor relations, is clogged up with cases of mistreatment in the private sector. Of comparing the workload versus how much someone is paid, and the whole demotivation in workspaces. You could tell us that a little bit more about that.
That's true, and that's why we shall always come in, bring in the example of Parliament, because they are the lawmakers in this country.
But the law is available.
It's available, but who's supposed to help in implementation of the same? And when they are passing these things of, waivers, tax, whatever, holidays and whatever for these investors, who are the people that approve that? They're the same people.
You have a Ugandan work for 3,000 Ugandan shillings.
Which is really sad. Which is really quite sad. And what
those that are into the manufacturing sector, in these factories, they have no gear to hold. They have lost their fingers, and it takes very long to hear their cases and even find justice for them.
And what
but there's a sitting
when they
government.
come out sometimes as a group of workers for a particular company, when they come out to express their grievances and whatever, then as usual we see them being depressed and all that. So for me, something has to be, because the other day I saw someone, they lost a leg. I mean, it is a steel industry, something like that, for Chinese. And they were being threatened not to say that. When journalists tried to go to cover that story, they were barred from entering, and whoever came out to speak, they were suspended. So no one fights for laborers in this country. Much as it is a private sector, but they're not an island. They're also under the constitution of Uganda. That is what,
Absolutely.
For example, I told you, yes, there is a salary. People were talking of the minimum wage, which for me doesn't work in Uganda. Because someone was saying that while there are some people who will come and tell you that I don't want money, just offer me accommodation and all that. So for me, it's quite hard for Ugandans. But as long as even if you're paying someone very low salaries, Banyaji, some of these conditions must be there as a country, as a human being, and whatever. Yes. For example,
yes.
But also those conditions would have mattered if we were treating our local workers differently.
But you see,
Because now-
I think
It's
also
differently how, for
expecting bosses or capital owners to treat employees perhaps with dignity, we are way too many that are available. The pool is too big that these people are picking from. Sometimes it says, well, you're desperate, you come, you want at least to have purpose. And the person reads the desperacy of your face. They're going to give you small money, exploit you, and if you think you can leave, you can go, and they will easily replace you with someone else. They literally just don't care.
Yes, true. But I'm looking at a situation where someone has been working for you for 3 years. For example, it's a radio station, and they are earning, say, 300,000 or 200 or whatever.
Yes.
Year in, year out, Banyaji. You don't consider transport, you don't consider time, you don't consider anything. There should be an increase in people's salaries automatically.
But the entrepreneur will tell you, I can only increase to as much as I'm able to get. I cannot give what I don't have. If at all I'm not making business, how are you expecting me to increase what I cannot afford?
Of course, no one monitors
now,
and
yes,
audits that. Yes, that they can give us an excuse, but you can be able to see, for example, if it was radio. By the way, I've been, for your information, I've been almost everything on radio, so you know what it happens. Someone tells you, I'm not getting anything, so what will I pay you? And yet you look at the commercials themselves, or even these radios that have death announcements and whatever.
Yes.
You just look at one particular day and you can pay for 10 employees, for example, a day. So you should not give exploitation, maximization of profits. That is too much.
Okay.
These people need to be considered.
And that's what labor democracy exactly solves. In our democracy, you get to know that actually we are now earning, the company is going profit, and so our dividends should equally improve. But beyond that, the point here was that now, how do you, a Chinese, right? I think before we go to national, that's why we should first deal with locally. If a Chinese treated me that bad, how do I go and report to a labor? I want a minister in this case.
Officer, maybe.
But who also actually treats the same way their employees, the same way.
Yes.
There's no difference.
Yes.
So there won't be change. That's why locally the politics and leaders etc have to have some sort of change. But secondly, is on the access to capital. The reason I think why in the US literally it's a little easier is because in the US you can be able to study even just on credit. There's so much credit, the banks have so much credit accessible to people that
That is cheap, actually.
yeah, it's so cheap that you can have a life you would literally not afford. That you're very poor in the US, but you attend the best schools, you drive almost good cars, you live in a decent
You
apartment.
live on credit.
Yeah, you live on credit almost all your life.
Yes.
Yeah, and yet here
You
just
have credit cards and-
Yeah,
and
I
all.
have credit cards. Here you have so much on debit. You have to have your own money. It's 300. If you don't afford, you go and sleep in a very bad place. You can't, So I think there is also that whole system that makes it a little easier there side. I think we also have to interrogate here on how do we have more credit access to our people.
Engineer Edgar, do you think this is just a natural phenomenon where the economy is where we are? The US is almost 300 years ahead of us. Perhaps they were like this or even less.
Singapore.
We made perhaps, but you see, it's the if you interrogated all the 54 African countries, even those that have been able to flip into perhaps the second world, talking about Nigeria or South Africa or Egypt, if you traverse those countries, the conditions are literally the same. They are poor, they're dilapidated households, and they're desperate, and things are literally the same.
Yes, and you see, of course, now there's a
But
problem.
General Museveni is not the president in South Africa. No, you see the president in Nigeria.
Yes. And you said I do understand what you're saying, because now there is a bigger problem that is structural.
That is structure,
Yes,
exactly.
on how the World Bank works, the IMF works. They know that for sure they create a system where they in their countries they can have the credit we're talking about. And so even the entrepreneurs, even the cost of business, the taxes and everything can be favorable.
Right.
And in yours it will be bad. But now again, that will take us to many things, African Union and etc. But the whole point is that I think as much as there's that structural problem, there's little you can do for your own people. Now, I don't think the World IMF would, for instance, intervene if you legitimately cut all these unnecessary budget spending in your parliament, in the salaries and etc. Giving people God not to protect who. Like, in the US, I think a minister, some good minister, would qualify to have security. Why? Because he's actually driving some important bill where some corporate companies think they're going to lose. Here, you protect a minister. Why? Because somehow he embezzled some money and perhaps those people all his he tried to confiscate someone's land.
Let's offer a break when we
And so
come
they
back
cut
to
his
the
name.
lifeline of the show, the telephone calls and the feedback on social media platforms. Don't touch it. We're coming back.
It's tough. It's bold. It's real politics. The Big Seat on 91.
we on the final lap of the show. Thank you so much for those that are, held up real good from where we started up at 9 a.m. up to where we at. We want to appreciate you very much. For those that are just joining us, the big sit happens every particular Saturday, 9 a.m. to 11, where we sit and discuss issues that concern us as Ugandans. Now, we've put a question on our topic of discussion this morning on our social media platforms, Twitter and Facebook. I can see the messages are coming through, and I want to appreciate the gentlemen and ladies that are glued up on their YouTube, on Crooze TV, catching the show. I can see Tuinomujun Bernard, you're on YouTube, and a couple of you, let me get the messages straight. Nwagaba Joseph, you're watching us and enjoying the show, and you're saying you're sending particular shout outs to your people, Ivan Palvov and at Kakankwasa, whatever Martinelli. Hope they got that. Ashbag Peters, you're saying you're streaming and watching live from Rukunjiri. Thank you very much, sir. Turiabe Praise, you're saying good morning. I know that the bodyguard represented many of them, because most of these bodyguards ain't treated like they should. The same time, not paid salaries. You're watching from Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Praise Turiabe, for contributing to the show. Then Kawagabe on Crooze TV, Valentine, you're watching from Uganda. Thank you. Ahwirwe, how about you're watching from Uganda? I appreciate you. Deus Akandwanaho, you're saying bodyguards should get their salaries in time to avoid those circumstances, and you're watching from Uganda. Let me get to Mugabe Mahad Kamkama, who is appreciating all the panelists and saying, however, the bodyguard did wrong, but also he taught government officials how to care and respect their workers. You're watching from Kabade University. Thank you, Mahad Kamkama Mugabe. Then Gaddafi Ismail, you're watching us from Bombo, and you're thanking us for the show. Adinitwe Evans, you're saying it's a bad act and I highly condemn it. But then it should be an eye opener to all bosses to inculcate a virtue of empathy. And you're watching from Poland. Yeah, Adinitwe Evans in Poland, just right next to Ukraine. I hope you're safe there. Osborne Namanya, you're saying good morning, and you're watching us from High Street Place Building in Bara. St. Paul's Nursery School, Igora Uganda. The employees in this country should revise themselves, and you're watching us from Uganda. Turiahewa Dennis, you're watching, and Gumisirize Atzidwe, you're watching from Kagadi. Much love, ladies and gentlemen, for contributing to our topic of discussion. Let me go to Facebook, and we put a question on what you think Uganda joined the rest of the world to commemorate the International Labour Day. The national celebrations were held in Amtumba under the theme promoting positive work ethics and culture, but unfortunately received the sudden death of the killing of the State Minister for Labour, Charles Okello Ongwola, by his bodyguard. Over allegations, it's scanty, we cannot pin down on just one. But the question is, it's not for the starters. We've seen this happen with protests from medical practitioners, teachers, and civil servants literally saying no, that working conditions are not favorable. We want to know, don't you think it's now going to explode and Ugandans will be the ones to pay? Ivan Palvov on Facebook, you're saying thank you to the panelists. You're listening again from Uganda, and you're saying, I think the country has been shocked for a while. The Minister of Labour failing to pay his workers. It should also be put on record that principals or ministers or VIPs do not actually pay their handlers. They are paid from the consolidated fund, maybe an allowance. Then Turinawe Gilbert, you're saying, thanking us for the show, and you're saying, I think we should work very hard in order to get our basic necessities, because the government is not in position to help the citizens. Orishaba Marcel, you're saying Ugandans have been very calm people, regardless of the high cost of living, but now they're waking up to this terrible regime. It's a matter of time. Lincoln King, you're saying such problems at work will continue to rise. I imagine if all Ugandans were to act like that bodyguard, no Chinese or Indian would still be alive. Why these MPs can't provide the minimum wage for the good of all Ugandans? They are all minding about how to remain in the positions they hold. It was terrible for such actions, but sometimes I look at the intensity of the cause and the decision of such a brutal action to the minister. The bodyguard could have been patient and shouldn't have reached that breaking point. Musimenta, Samuel, you're watching us from Rwanda and you're listening from Rwanda. Thank you. But they're saying, but Uganda is really seated on the time bomb. And then Godfrey Agava, you're watching us from Buweju and you're saying, you see, me, I don't know what's wrong with some people. Okay, I'm sorry to say, but I didn't know that minister pay his employees well. You've written it in a very, I've not gotten it right. Asmani, you just sent a message on Facebook and it's saying the right thing is for each official should be having one job, but if you find one heading having more than one job, Hussein Ahia, you're saying salam alaikum. I think it's physiological and mental guidance required for some workers. I also wondering why people are saying it's because of money, but yet there are claims that the UPDF are paid 4 days before. Thank you, Nahia Hussein, for that feedback. In Kisoba Bushenyi, Nuwahereza, Faustino, you're listening, and Bombene Benjamin, you're saying being a Ugandan is a full-time job. Let me get to Twitter before I open the lines. Get yourselves ready on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. Wakanda Rogers, you're saying the country's focus should be more on how to create enough jobs for all Ugandans, as opposed to discussing the welfare and enhanced remuneration of a few employed Ugandans. You're listening in from Makenke Barracks. Thank you, Wakanda Rogers. Brian Akandwanaho, you're appreciating us. The Hustler, you're saying celebrating International Labour's Day was totally good for the country, but corruption, investment, bribery, and discrimination has totally affected the working environment, and the government should be interested into getting possible immediate solution to the problem. Go to at Crooze at 912 Crooze FM and at Vanyaji. You can be able to tag me at Vanyaji. I'll get the message. Then Alan Bachinyen, so you're saying in my view Uganda shouldn't be celebrating Labor Day. No minimum wage, poor and delayed pay, high taxes, bribery, especially in the District Service Commission, tribalism, discrimination, inequality, connections for one to get a job. Talk of so many. I'll be getting back to some of the messages, but I see you, Tuliamsiva Gordon. I see you, Kamala David, who is saying, yes, because we celebrate the days, yet the owner of that day are not feeling happy at all. Celestine Jeboy, who is saying, it has no meaning to celebrate Labor Day. And thanks to Yamsi Magoden in Nyabi Sidira in Kashari. You're saying treating graduate doctors, engineers, and teachers is not good. Well, let's get to the telephone lines on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The lifeline of the show. Good morning. Ndireje orirota sebo.
Azananye ndireje.
Nichurunje.
Nakura safe sifogu n'abandi abo ino mu studio. Wagambaho n'abayanuzi Eugene Nyakayezu.
Okay.
Nimbanza no kusasa na minisita ogw'ebando research kale cyo busasi. Nketi nkwenda kubahaburaho no gumano baha ababa bodyguard umusaro mbwire.
Okay.
Abo kubaho jara kawagumheyiro mbwire cyo kitakabasa kuba.
Okay.
Kandi atene kini kibanke cyo kushwazana wasanga nka minisita Murambaga hanga ngo witwa mukuma abo kubara kumusasara. Nani sawa begarke munawe.
Alright. Yabara mnonga kutera guy. Ronnie Cafero in Rentondo, you're listening in, and you're saying not only sitting on the time bomb, but the collapse of the country is imminent. Let me pick more of your calls on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The big set.
Yes,
yes, good morning, sir.
Good morning. You're talking to me, Hilary from Yamugaru Shigaramashema.
Yes, Hilary in Shema.
For me, what I think causes those problems in the country is that the high rates of inflation, of unemployment.
Okay.
Kuba umuntu uba kuba bahiro mu rumono bamuhereza akasente kake majango nabagwangwa mu rumogwe they will but inflation.
Okay. I didn't get the message very clearly. The big set. Good morning.
Good morning to you. This is Genius Agava, as usual, from Chitorentra in Vishenyi. Vishenyi has been represented on the big seat.
Odiro Tagawa.
And Ndire kurunji. Now what I wanted to say, it is that this Uganda should know how many people they have that they are mad. They should bring mental health unit such that they should know how many people are mentally mad in Uganda. And also, finally, I wanted to advise those women in Uganda who have the house girls at home. They shouldn't mistreat house girls, because those house girls, they are the ones that having their lives in their hands. They should be careful, because something might happen at any time. Sifa, thank you. I'm listening.
Yevare Agava Ruzunga Agava. On 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The big seat.
Hello, Crooze FM.
Yes, you're loud and clear. What's your name and where you're calling us from? Ndire kurunjisha niwe.
This is AG Da Costa. I'm calling you from Paris in Zero. Moja tukora Mr.
Okay.
Nimba takusima tunanabo programu. Na magua tulikaraba ara MTV tunabo digayiti. Kokanye ndagamba Mr. Nenke kwabara ba MTV tunigaba digayita bokomba kosaba abantu. Ogune bashishira bakuvulaho umbire burugo bw'isire mazina no wasokora umuntu. Tutanga yaza kushashara abura neze bashatu. Mr. Ningambara ba MTV ikindi kana bamba zina abunze batakushashara ba bodyguard bawo makabafuna kibarayanda family yabo nabo. Ari Mr. Dinara mutaba ba student ba St. Ignatius High School bona.
Kare bambi bari kutera. The big seat.
Hello.
Yes, please.
I'm good, Fabian. I'm calling here in Nivaru.
Yes, Fabian.
Mr. Wanyaja, I want to thank this person next week. Safi, and those man.
Edgar Mtundsa.
Yeah. When eating Korea, hati mazama kahurahongo bakajen obaboda obaden bagamba bakajang akabana harangu ngo omukazi uya inenda bon gen nkeri yana ninde mazama ngo atiki no kunyana umukozi wawe n'ikintu kirungi abukuba kuno jango kama mwine umuntu kuyo kugambira Jesus kugiye mu kuganira yani ndangu niwe no basa kumuyambaho nawa kuyambeho tubase kuzinga amagara gite nabasima bambe
Karibambe. The big set.
Hello, Mr. Wanyaja.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yes, how are you doing, my brother?
This is AG Da Costa. I'm calling from Paris in Zero.
Yes, Derek Da Costa.
No, this is AG.
AG.
No, so what I was on Mr. Wanyaja.
Okay.
Mwenye nani ngagamba muramugogu. Ikini manja kusima na vuare tomu programu. Nkanyenda kwamiza ntumazima abantu ba MPV tumazima nibaze ni sente kunkabo ikimanya gwe kimbagenda abanyaga abakozi bagenzi babo namba barya abantu nkabo kandi ibintu family. Nakwani ngenda ndiho Mr. Wanyaja. Nogenda ko umuntu mukuru kwezi akushashara aho nize kadra tubona najya unangwa no bisuga hotsi. Mazimanye nimbaza sasa na empogwe isashana nshashana empogwe sashana n'abantu bona abo kumukwataho kumukozi nuko nababe nashasha bodyguard gumusosi bagumwe bashashara bodyguard bawo ubwire bwishikire kari Mr. Wanyagizo barungi
Niwe bambe. Thank you so much. The big set.
Hello, Crooze FM.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning to Banaji.
I'm well, thank you. How are you? What's your name and where are you calling from?
This is Dan calling here in North. Banyaji wewe kutetera mu mulungi. Amaze kuramusha abantu bakasanzira shema.
Okay.
atwaza package ey'abagiga kaza y'abaminisita n'aba MP ng'osanga oyine omukozi ninga oyine nka house girl nayina oburamu bwawe bwona konka bo natakukimanya niyo naningira ngu bamwe bakwate gye ba bodyguard boona n'abakozi baabo babafure banoonyeho kandi babasasure ombwenu kubanga nabo n'abantu bebare kuteereza abanyagi
Yebare kutera. The big set. Oh, I just lost that call on 752912912178091291. So those are the numbers to call. I'll be able to get you and, get to hear from you on what you think about the topic of discussion. But don't hesitate to go on our social media platforms, 912 Crooze FM on Twitter and 91.2 Crooze FM on Facebook. I'll put a question on our topic of discussion. I'll be able to get some of your messages. But I want to thank you so much for those that are tweeting, for those that are giving us good feedback, and those that are watching on Crooze TV, courtesy of Creative Digital Media. I want to say thank you so much. The messages are still coming in, and I want to give you an opportunity to perhaps call in and we hear you on what you think about the topic of discussion. With me in studio is Sifa Safi, regular panelist on the big set, and engineer Edgar Mtundisa, who is the youth East African representative for Uganda. On 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The big set.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
Mr. Kennedy.
Yes, please.
You are talking with Moses in Sinjiro.
Yes, Moses in Sinjiro.
Yeah, songe kwate n'abakozi. Abakozi baba treating kubikanda binyimba basasura peanuts. Babanga no kubasasura ombwire, so ya yet see more.
Okay.
Ifa namara msyani mukunda mnonga.
Karibam, yeah, cool. On 752, let me end with a bit of about two calls and we hit the short bumper when we come back into our second topic of discussion on 752-912-912 and 780-912-910. The big set.
Mr. Wanyaji.
Yes, hello, caller.
This is Godwin in Ruti here, Mbarara.
Yes, Godwin in Ruti.
But let me tell you this. This Uganda, what you know, Eviana Navana. That's why we have some of the people who I'm earning 100k or 1000k. Konkuka shanga na jambu this omukozo go hansi. Takwasa kuma earning we a single shilling.
Okay.
So that's why in our Uganda we have Eviana Navana.
Let me receive this last call. We came back after breather and then we get into our topic of discussion for the second time. The big set.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
You're talking to Godfrey.
Yes, Godfrey.
I'm calling in from Chaka.
Yes, Chaka. My regards to the beautiful people of Chaka.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
On that issue, I really see these big people, they just undermine those people that those are working today for them. Mostly like when you got security, when you got those house girls, for me they undermine them. I don't really think whether it's a big deal, but I don't know why.
All right.
Maybe these people from nowhere, you would develop some such minds, they end up doing such things. I don't know why, but most of the security, when you got security, when you go to these housemates, those gardeners, you see them undermining them so really much. And it's not a good idea.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate the feedback. Janat on YouTube, Crooze TV, you're watching, and I want to say thank you very much. And to talk about the employees should be paid on time, and how do you pay a person 200k? How they pay all their bills with this 200k? And you're watching from Kakova, and then I see you Abutwe CJ, who is watching from Katete, and there's so many of you. I want to appreciate you very much. We're stopping up. When we come back, we'll be talking about the World Press Freedom Day. Don't touch your dial. 91.2 Crooze FM, Western Uganda's biggest radio. The big set. My name is Wes Sigebanyaji. want to say thank you so much for those that held up real good. Now, Uganda joined the rest of the world to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the World Press Freedom Day. In the years since the proliferation of independent media in many countries and the rise of digital and social media, have definitely unshackled information from its moorings and allowed its free flow. We have witnessed beatings of journalists by security agencies, confiscation of equipment, imprisonment, and orders on censorship. And our question is, what's your take on media space and growth in the era of the Internet of Doing Things? With me to discuss this is Sifa Safi and Edgar Mtunsa. Edgar, well, perhaps we've talked about these unfortunate events too many times. There is no way now governments across the world would be accustomed to the old conventional way of transmitting information. Everyone is now an informal journalist. The moment you have a cell phone in your hands, you can send information. Information is now being shared ASAP. Something can happen in the US right now, and I know it, miles away. Something will happen in Uganda, and someone will know it in Australia, in Japan, whatever, in the instant. As we celebrated the World Press Freedom Day, must governments now change of what they should be able to perceive of these messengers of information? We've been able to see confrontations, beatings, like it was in the very old. Even if you beat me, the information is already in the people because they have the gadgets that can be able to transmit this information. World Press Freedom Day.
Yes, I think so much, Mr. Manaji. I don't think the government should intervene or even labor to try to control that, because this is the only sort of liberatory mechanism we have from the old-fashioned ways that could be so much censored. The fact that when you have few radio stations or NBS, NTV and etc. transmitting information, it's easy for politicians to hide or even threaten those people. And then in so doing, there's so much, have us deprived of that information, and that's unfair. So I think this whole new trend of online sharing etc., which is very hard to censor, makes it very nice for the people and also fair that everyone can access information, because there's no much that corporatocracy that was for the past years, had all this bearing on information. But secondly, I think also the media, the traditional media is not that much good, because for sure, and I saw one time, I think, on one of social medias, on how someone was talking about how it's very easy in Uganda to know even the worst sort of musicians, etc., and not know a minister, right? And was trying to show how maybe in his thinking was that it's intentional, that even the media, the level of things that we consume, are not that much enlightening. Yeah, so I think the idea was that the media is not doing that much well. But also, if you know the roles of the media, to inform, educate, entertain. In most cases, I think there is always a line on when is the media informing and not educating, and when is the media educating and not informing. What's the difference between you getting informed and you not being educated? What the media largely does, it informs us of a few things. Rarely do we have the education we're supposed to have. But even this new thing of online, sort of where everyone is journalist.
Perhaps now the issue is about you have a person who is able to share this information. No editorial team that can be able to prove and double check and cross check the information they are sharing. It's more of the sensational kind of media sharing, and because there is social media and you can do anything when you want it because you can afford it without thinking about the consequences.
Yes, now I do understand that, but the problem is I think these people do, because there are consequences. That is law, right? If you did things which are not true, defamatory and stuff like that, it doesn't matter, they will come for you. And I think the people know this who are using these news channels. But to give just an example, there's a journalist in the US called Tucker Carlson, who has been very good and so much against that, not against, but so much, how is it called? Keen on this government of Biden. But now, as we speak now, at first he was working for Fox News, he's no longer working for Fox News. But he had built a base, and his way of conveying his messages, there was proof. He would print like a video and analyze for that statement, consider more incidents, etc., analyze them, and shows you where the real sad part is, that not any media out there will show you. And so now, such people, we do need them, because this mainstream media is so easy to manipulate. And I think the state will use that excuse of no, everyone is doing it, there's no censorship, there's no what, but I think that people are intelligent enough to know what's censored or not. And if there are other felonies, like these statements are not true and etc., or that is illegal in its own sense, and it's just a problem.
See, for South World Freedom Press Day and Press Freedom Day, I beg your pardon. Really, at least you're a practicing journalist, I'm certain. When you see the treatment of the state to the how much there is a lot of mistrust between the state and the journalists, you know. We've seen a flight of media practitioners leaving the field to go and do other things because it's not as profitable, it's not as rewarding, you know. Talking about, you know, being curtailed, being censored by the editors and, you know, the bars and the limitations upon which they can be able to grow and, you know, convey the message to the people. There've been limitations. As we celebrate the World Press Freedom Day, what is there to earmark now?
Thank you, and congratulations to all the journalists that celebrated and that are happy and enjoying their jobs. One, of course, when you have a free press, it empowers citizens, it puts the government on check, it educates and informs people like we all know. But there should be limitations, and not just in Uganda, but elsewhere. And I'm happy about the Computer Misuse Act as amended last year, because it puts somehow boundaries for these people not to overstep. We know that it's not been fair and people have been complaining, but one of the reasons why it is still what it is in Uganda is because of the ego of most journalists. They have failed to come together, and you know, numbers make numbers, the unity power. There is power in unity. Exactly. So in some other countries, for example, in is it Nigeria, where journalists are together, they're one, they speak the same voice, and when they come out, you also feel, you know, touched as a government. You feel these people are powerful and they can do something.
There is authority and legitimacy.
Exactly.
Yes.
But here you talk of uniting them under Uganda Journalists Association.
But they have a price, Sifa.
A price of doing what?
They are all being bought off by the regime. What do you...
Not necessarily by the regime, by the way. Some of them are bought off by individuals and whatever.
It is possible,
like I told you, I've been on radio and I've been in print media. What happens is you have a very nice story that was supposed to inform people and wake them up and empower them and whatever, but because someone has given you 2 million and said, keep quiet about it, it happens. I know even in one of the radio stations I worked for, this editor was being paid off, actually including a case of defilement. So these things happen a lot. You know, you have a very big story in this district and you're about 3. One is a journalist from, I don't know which radio, and you come together and you're paid money. So that is what happens. What you are saying, they're also not competent enough, some of the journalists we have. We have some very good journalists that we know, but others are very bad that you wouldn't even want them to be in the media. So one thing is they have to come together for them to be heard, for them to have one voice. But then another thing is some politicians should stop intimidating journalists. Politicians, some of them are individuals, by the way. But again, the issue of corruption has even made these people lose meaning and trust by the public. You know, like I said, some of the excuses they are giving, we are getting little, and that is why we are corrupt and we can be bought off. But I'm saying, even if you did journalism or mass communication or whatever, but it's not a must that you have to be on radio or TV. We know people who have done public administration, they're very good at that, but they've gone to do farming because they did not get what they expected in journalism.
Include your parting shots.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, we need each other. Government should know that they need journalists. And when they're mistreating them, there should be a limit. But journalists also should not know that being a journalist is not a ticket to heaven.
Yes.
We know people, just because you sit behind a microphone when you're a presenter, and when you go out there, you're like, you brag and whatever, and you think you should get free things here and there, transport, food and whatever. So you're also human beings. But
parting
again,
shots,
it is one of the industries where there is a lot of connivance and, you know, all that. When you shine out because you have a nice show, because people like it, then some people want to undermine work behind you to ensure that there is at least bakulemese. That's what happens a lot in the media, just like in politics. So that's another thing. But as I conclude, Banyaji, I want to finalize
in a second.
Workers, let me speak in Nyankodi. Abantu abakozesa abantu twagamba aba bosses on basirikali ndachi konkani twena. Omuntu yayingo musirwa if it's a garden. Actually, for us in Islam, you should be able to pay someone before their sweat dries off. Actually, even the Bible has verses about that. Leviticus, John and all that. We should be able to pay workers whatever level. Kwara abali omukozi omuka ni chejo. But these big people, especially in security, I want to tell you that if you have a bodyguard, he's a bodyguard. Do not expect him to feed your pets. Do not expect him to clean your house and all that. Unless you agree on it, and maybe you'll have tips and here and there, and he's very happy and willing to do that.
Okay.
But these things of forcing them to do things that are out of their
Thank you,
job,
Sifa.
that is out. But finally, Banyaji,
In a second,
regulations, labor regulation in this country under international labor organizations should be considered and put into consideration. For example, there are conditions of work and all that. But what hurts me most as a woman, we have women who have gone for maternity leave, and by the time they come back, they have been replaced. That is sad and unheard of.
Very good. Not
Thank
to
you
part.
so much.
You're parting shot in a second, engineer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Banaji. Thank you so much, Safi. I think it has been a very nice discussion. I think on just the issue of press, these limitations, they shouldn't be convinced to buy into these limitations, because it's very simple. We had a portrait exhibition, which I doubt any station here, TV station, could have portrayed. And because of that, the government president made a pledge to do some work on those potholes. Because on the video on Twitter, we had AIDS exhibition, and the PS of Health, or Minister of Health, made some pledges to that extent. And that shows to you how the mainstream media is not necessarily the most influential, and so we need to own media.
Okay.
Now, number two, I think on the issue of labor, we've already discussed it, but I don't want people just be judgmental so much towards against this person who committed suicide. Sometimes also in the army, what we must remember is that sacrifice is a very big virtue. Who knows? Perhaps this bodyguard decided to sacrifice his life and that of the person so that the other bodyguards and elsewhere can have a better life.
Yes, Sifa.
It is very important. We are talking of inequality, not necessarily in government for civil servants, but even in particular radio stations, for example. You find, Banyaji, we do the same things, we work for the same hours, but I get almost quarter your salary. That is too bad.
Okay. Thank you, Sifa Safi. My name is Wesley Banyaji, but my punchline this week is, looks like COVID is back. The colds are everywhere. The flu, the coughs, it is everywhere. Get back that mask on, or else we're in problems. Let's meet next Sunday on the Big Seat. We have news at the top of the hour. Don't change your radio, because Crooze FM is definitely the best. Have a fantastic weekend.
The views expressed on this program are not necessarily the views of this radio station or its management.
This radio is regulated by Uganda Communications Commission, UCC.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachiko. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Haven't you heard of the parish development model, PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
I know, it is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.